Hello, everybody. Welcome or welcome back to Tiny Tiger Collective. We are now in the last week of June, and it is time for me to bring you my mid-year review of my planner and journal lineup for 2025, otherwise known as my mid-year techo kaigi. This has been an incredible journey over these last 6 months. Not only having the opportunity to experiment and play and express myself creatively through a range of these beautiful journals, but it's also been 6 months since I've started making videos on YouTube and seeing this community be cultivated all around me to receive inspiration, empathy, and support from each of you week by week, day by day. All of this has been such a gift for me, and it has deepened my relationship with my journals and helped me strengthen my insight and reflection around how I want to use these instruments with intentionality. So let me move my Hobonichis aside for you, and let's begin with my occasional journals. 3 months ago, when I gave you my Q1 techo kaigi, I began with these 2 books. So since the beginning of the year, I've been practicing keeping a Commonplace book. This was the first traveler's notebook that I ever received, and it was a birthday present from my partner a couple of years ago. I have a regular dotted inset that I began by doing some cute decorations, pasting in little notepads and stickers, and I started writing all the quotes and excerpts in here that reflected the kind of mothering that I wanted to do and the kind of mother that I wanted to be. So this began as a commonplace book all about parenting and the relationship that I would like to cultivate with my son. However, even as I reflected on 3 months ago in the Q1 Techo Kaigi, I wasn't really sure what all of this was for. It was rather time consuming for me to copy in meticulously all the quotes and excerpts that I was reading. And yet, I was left feeling a little bit lost as to the point of me keeping this book. And my relationship with my son and my practices of mothering are changing all of the time. It's something dynamic, breathing, and alive. And putting things down in this book, codifying it as though it was some sort of enduring or universalistic practice, didn't quite align with my embodied experience of mothering. And for a myriad of reasons, I knew that while there was value in a commonplace book, I had to be more mindful, more deliberate about how I was adapting that practice in a way that served both the content that I was trying to commonplace, as well as how that knowledge would be put into practice. So after a couple of months of keeping this attempt at a commonplace book, I started developing the sense that a commonplace book shouldn't be, for me, in a bound system. That didn't reflect the way that knowledge for me is developed through bricolage. So different layers and fragments weave into one another as opposed to being logically or chronologically structured. So after a lot of thinking, I decided to move my Commonplace system into a ring-bound format. But rather than rushing into purchasing a new planner, I sat with that idea for the last 3 months. And I planned out what that Commonplace system would look like. And I even practiced writing entries, going away, coming back a couple of weeks later, and exploring how everything still sat with me over time. And after 3 months of dedicated, intentional work, I've decided to take the plunge and purchase a Filofax planner, which should actually be arriving later this afternoon, but it didn't quite arrive in time for me to share it on camera with you today. But in the coming months, I hope to unbox my new Filofax for you and tell you in a lot more detail about the system that I have spent the last 3 months designing and how I will assemble and grow this Commonplace system through the ring-bound planner. I am not abandoning the book. I still think the insert is perfectly fine to keep all of my parenting, mothering knowledge and insights, but I will be finding another use for that cover. In a similar sense, I haven't done very much with my travel notebook. So this is the Tokyo Station exclusive traveler's notebook that I purchased from Tokyo Station when I went to Japan last March and April. Here I have the insert that I purchased at the same store with a stunning red brick Marunouchi building at the front. And shortly after I got back from Tokyo, I decided to play with collage elements and, to be honest, have an excuse to use up some of the stationery goodies like washi tapes and stickers that I had been hoarding. And I made a little minimalist travel notebook. At this time, my son was around 20 months old, and the needs of mothering were changing all of the time. It would be that maybe I'd have a month where things were really easygoing. I found I had lots and lots of time to steal away a couple of hours while my son was napping to work on this book. But then he might get sick, and the rolling illnesses through daycare would then cascade through to me and my partner. And there may be 2 months where I'm knocked out and I'm not able to work in on this book. So I had a few placeholders about the remaining days of our holiday that I hadn't finished collaging. And I had the sense that the second half of this book, because there are plenty of pages left, I would continue on the tradition and collage and document our next family vacation, which happened in April this year. So just a couple of months ago when we traveled through New Mexico and California together. So I haven't quite had the time to work on this book, but for me, there's no urgency to do so because, as you can see, I'm not doing the kind of traditional travel journaling where I document exactly what we did each day, our itinerary, where we visited, but instead, in every trip that we've done as a family, I've held on to ephemera. I've made notes in my regular analog planners, journals, and as well as my digital journaling apps. And all of those scraps of insights and memories will be absolutely vital for me to draw on as I continue building out this book organically in my own time, at my own pace. For me, the enjoyment is savored because I might get to look back on holidays that I did months, if not years prior, but I have a lot of the documentation that I need. And it feels like I am reliving those beautiful memories again. And to me, I treasure the creative expression and interpretation of those memories, even when they've faded far from my mind, because for me, I get to revisit them and relive them from a different point of view, as in the case of family vacations, as a more experienced and I hope a wiser mother. Now, that said, over the past few months, when I've shared my Traveler's Notebook collection on this channel, I've been met with the most generous outpouring of inspiration and ideas from each and every one of you. So while I haven't felt the urgency to work on my travel and my Commonplace books, I have made use of two more Traveler's Notebooks in my collection. The first is my Kyoto exclusive Traveler's Notebook in the deep navy, along with charms I purchased on the same trip. And this was because I rather unexpectedly, at the end of our travels in the US, my son met a lovely couple who were telling him their stories about how they visited Australia and our hometown because they were traveling on a very special 5-month post retirement cruise. And my son became really curious about what cruises were, what cruise ships look like. And at that time, I had absolutely zero interest in ever setting foot on a cruise ship my whole life. But I decided to look up a Disney cruise and I showed him the ship with the iconic Mickey Mouse on their funnels. And he became so enamored with the idea of going on a Disney cruise that before I knew it, within days, I found myself diving into the rabbit hole of Disney cruising, watching vlogs, tips and tricks videos, finding a lively YouTube community as passionate as our Stationery YouTube community. And I booked us a Disney cruise sailing out of Sydney for 5 nights next January. And all of that happened within weeks. I found myself becoming quite obsessed with cruising. I found myself disabusing myself of a lot of stereotypes I had of cruising and cruisers. And I started doing a lot of research, but more excitedly, pouring out that research into this special Disney cruise book. So I've been spending time decorating, collaging these pages, writing down everything that I'm learning, everything that I'm excited for, and all of our plans, including the Disney films that I plan to show my son in the next few months leading up to our cruise so that he can better understand and appreciate the characters he will meet on board, as well as the thoughtfully themed restaurants, play areas, and kids clubs on board. This was a little printable ornament that was made available for me to download after I made my booking. And these other decorative elements are either ones that I've printed from the Disney website themselves or were collected through my years of stashing, journaling, and collaging supplies. And these photographs I've taken with my Instax Mini Evo, which not only functions as a working camera, but it allows me to link my phone up with an app and print off either photographs I've taken myself on my phone or with photographs and images that I found online. So because I haven't gone on to the cruise yet, you'll see that I have a couple of Instax photos that I was able to print through their official promotional pictures. And because I am about as passionate about food as I am about stationery, I've had a whole spread dedicated to all the dishes from the 3 rotational restaurants that I'm most excited to try. And I hope to take this journal with me on board and fill up the remaining pages with live reflections of what we get up to each day, and also to report back on whether or not the food that I thought would taste the best really lived up to my expectations. So this has been a project of absolute joy and delight. Then last month, my friend and colleague, Livy, so wonderfully was traveling through Japan for work because she teaches the most incredible intensive subject where she takes a group of MBA students from our university to Japan to meet with companies and learn about Japanese business practices. And she happened to be there while Travelers Company launched their new Red Love and Trip notebooks. And I saw this as a wonderful opportunity to acquire my first passport size traveler's notebook. So Libby kindly picked this journal up for me, along with a craft folder, my beloved dotted inserts that I have to have with every single traveler's notebook I purchase, and of course the exclusive Love and Trip red notebook with the sweet cat on the cover. She actually ended up getting me 2 of these notebooks because I don't think she was aware that this came with the cover itself, and she wanted to be absolutely sure that I had it, which says a lot about what a lovely, considerate person Libby is and how lucky I am to have her as a friend. So I decided to keep this book as a little mini passion project where I document and express my love of stationery. There is no structure, no plan to this, but only that I found it as the perfect little paper shrine for all the little bits and pieces that I collect as a lover of stationery who is starting to build community with other stationery lovers. So whether it is receiving happy mail from my lovely stationery friends like Moonlit Journal, receiving little charms such as that from my friend Ilaria and her new polymer clay jewelry business, Aquase, little stickers, samples from my friend Alison of Little Coco Studio, and the wonderful pieces that I collected when I attended my first Southeast Queensland Journal Keepers meetup. Indeed, this gorgeous little cherry charm that you see on the side of my traveler's notebook that perfectly complements the red was made by Christy from the Southeast Queensland Journal Keepers. And she prepared these lovely handmade charms along with a big bag of stationery goodies that she distributed to every single participant of our last and my first meeting. So I actually took this book blank at that time to that meeting where we spent a whole day in the Square Library in downtown Brisbane working on our books and our planners side by side, pushing chocolates back and forth and also placing out our supply of stickers, washi, pens, inks, all across the gigantic boardroom table and inviting one another to explore, play, take part in all the things that we collectively love. So I've had a little bit of fun in this journal, decorating, pasting in little scraps, decorative elements. I use my Instax camera to print out some photographs that I've taken. I believe these were actually for thumbnails for this YouTube channel, but what great documentation of, say, my fountain pen collection there. I didn't even use this in one of my videos, but it was a shot that I took that I think I wanted to originally consider using for my stationery overconsumption video essay, which garnered a lot of interest, engagement, debate. So I really encourage you to take a look at my essay if you're interested in the topic of consumption and also the moral policing and weaponized shame that comes along with online communities on social media. These were all stickers that I had received in Happy Mail with my fellow journal keepers at that meetup. I have my packaging sticker from my Hobonichi 2025 lineup order that I received at the end of last year. And on that day, actually, before I decorated these preceding pages, I had written down a list using my new Banu Euphoria Cherry Blossom pen, kindly gifted by Banu, inked up with Diamine Shimmering Sea, which is a dark blue ink with gold shimmer particles. I had written down the names of all the inks that I wanted to try from my friend Jo's book. So she had an ink swatch book and she let me painstakingly flip through page after page, hoarding her book for myself as I wrote down the names of every ink that caught my eye, which was quite a lot and quite hard for me to resist writing down every single ink in her collection. So in these remaining cream blank pages, I hope to dip in over the next few months to paste in little ephemera, stickers, decorations, jot down little notes about all the things I love about stationery and maintain this, which will be my shrine of my love for stationery. So now let me bring out the 3 Hobonichis that I have been keeping since the end of March. So some of you might remember from my Q1 techo kaigi video, the very first quarter of this year, I was still in my Hobonichi cousin from 2024. This was a spring start that I purchased in person in Japan, and there were a few remaining pages that I was able to journal, or as you can see, not journal, until the end of March when I completed this book. It was bittersweet, bitter in that I had so loved writing in a cousin for the past year. It gave me the space to pour out my emotions and really dive deep, provide evocative detail of all the happiest and some sad memories that I wanted to hold onto and process through these pages. But it was sweet in that since January, I also started keeping these 3 Hobonichi daily planners, and it had become extremely unwieldy for me to keep 4 books alongside my full-time job and running after a lively, energetic toddler. So come the end of March, I was able to set this book aside and just focus on these 3 daily planners. So the one that has worked so well for me is this Hobonichi Techo A6 size with Keiko Shibata's cover, Mr. and Mrs. Inoue Bus Management. This is not the kind of cover that I would normally pick with bus, with dogs, with bright red, but it was one that the moment I saw during Hobonichi's announcement of their 2025 lineup, I thought encapsulated my son perfectly. He loves buses, he loves dogs, and at that time he really loved red, but if you ask him now, he would tell you his favorite color is pink, and he also adores anything that's purple. But nevertheless, this book became my new toddler journal after the very first Hobonichi I ever bought, which was this A6 techo. I bought this back in 2023, and I only discovered Hobonichi at that time in July, and I got the spring start so that there wouldn't be so much of the year that I had already missed. So instead, I did a tiny bit of back journaling, a tiny bit of decorating for those early months, and then started journaling in this in earnest once this book arrived to me in July. And this book was a place where around the time my son was 6 months to 18 months old, I kept daily records of everything he was learning and doing. I was keeping records of his first words, his first babbles, the first time he walked, pulled himself up to standing. And even when he started moving into solid foods, this book was a place where I got to keep all the records of what he was eating, what I was feeding him, what foods he enjoyed. You see, we went to Japan in March, and I was able to hold on not just to the memories of what we got up to each day, Ueno on their birthday, where they offer free admission to the public, and we happened to be in Tokyo with a day off on that very day. But I was able to also paste in these ticket stubs as well of the museums and the gardens that he adored the most. So I decided when I moved into the Hobonichi cousin in April 2024 that I would retire this book and take a break from daily toddler journaling so that I could focus on maintaining the cousin. However, across those 9 months, there was not a single week that passed that I didn't miss that ritual of writing about my son. And in fact, there were moments where I was writing memories about what my son said, what he did in the cousin, that I knew would be so difficult for me to find in and amongst journal entries about stresses I was having at work or discussions I was having with my friends and the laundry that I had to do and the dentist appointment that I had on that Friday afternoon. So come 2025, and I purchased another Hobonichi techo so that it could become my dedicated toddler journal. At the front, I've collected these little cards, these little pieces that are from outfits that I've bought my son. So I bought him a couple of Hello Kitty t-shirts, jumpers, and it came with this really high quality, thick tag. And it was the perfect width to tuck into here. So it looks like Hello Kitty is peeping out and saying hello. I did the same. I bought him some Bluey toys and I cut this out from the packaging, and it's a big, thick cardstock. And Bluey gets to tuck in here and peep out and go, hello. I have some stickers that I got from Koala Tea Care. So these are waiting to be pasted into spreads, and I can write little notes on them. I kept Keiko Shibata's artist card. I've heard of some people describe this as stickers, but I am fairly sure they're not. I think they're just a little bit of a précis about Keiko Shibata. And because it is a cute dog lying on a bread bed, I decided why not to pair it with this little mini letter set that I bought from Daiso. And it's sealed, but I wrote a little note to my son about why I kept this book for him and how it encapsulates my love for him. I also have this little sampler tag of washi tape from Alison of Little Coco Studio, as well as another little sampler from Moonlit Journal. In the yearly spread, I keep track of my son's illnesses and doctor visits. The monthlies are just places for public holidays, special events, anniversaries, birthdays. And the daily pages, since the start of the year, is where I have been pretty diligently recording all the things that we get up to, all the things he says, he does. And I write all of this in the second person so that it's intended for my son to read this when he's older and he can hear me talk to him about the memories we made together and how proud I am of him and how much I adore him. I'll also paste in little bits of drawings that he's done. And indeed, a lot of the little artworks that he creates, including this little paper plane that he had drawn all over, are just the little treasures that I get to keep in here. This is another tag from a jumper. And I love these little plastic A6 folders from Hobonichi. And I love to just tuck inside little mementos, like this Christmas ornament that his daycare printed and then sent home with us at the end of the year. And that's of my son painting and decorating a Christmas wreath out of a paper plate. In this folder, I like to keep little stickers that I bought from Japan so that I can always have decorative elements on hand. This one is Gurumpa's Kindergarten, which was from Hobonichi, and I believe I purchased that one in 2023. I can't remember who suggested this or if they still even watch my videos, but earlier this year, when I was showing a little bit of a flip through of how I'd been using this toddler journal, one viewer suggested in the comments that I use these monthly blank page at the front of each month as a way to summarize my son's development and his interests. And I absolutely adore that idea. So I've previously been leaving these pages completely blank in my cousins as well as this A6 techo. But now at the end of every month, I'll flip back to the start of the month. I'll always begin it with a sentence saying how old he is that month. And then I'll write about what he's been interested in. So does he have a current favorite book, a song that he's singing around the house, a game he likes to play, a favorite toy he hasn't been able to leave behind? And month by month, and you know, with toddlers, they change so much and so fast. I've been able to keep track of all of his monthly interests and changing whims through these pages. Really, it was a random choice, but at the start of the year, I decided that I would exclusively be writing in this book with my Sailor Pro Gear Slim Meigetsu in a medium fine nib, inked up with J. Eban Rue d'encre. And then that brings me to my 2 Hobonichi weeks. When I first discovered Hobonichi as a brand, the slim pocket size of the Hobonichi weeks was one product that I thought, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to invest in that particular thing. I have very little use for pocket notebooks because I tend to be quite verbose in my writing, and I really love having the space of at least an A6, if not an A5 cousin, for me to really express my thoughts and my emotions. But I saw so many examples of content creators on YouTube who have been using their Hobonichi weeks to incredible effect. So I bought 2 because I couldn't decide between these 2 which design I wanted. And I have the Unsoro Bijitsu Kai and the Yumi Kitagishi Beautiful Weeks. My Unsoro Bijitsukai cover is the one that I use as my work planner. In my monthlies, I note travel, semesters, I note work events, key deadlines, and public holidays. And then in these weekly spreads, I've been experimenting with different layouts, different structures, and different practices in order to track my work tasks. So when I first broke into this book, I separated the days into two columns, a smaller one for meetings and events, and then the larger side for tasks that I had to complete. But I very quickly noticed that whenever I skipped a task or needed to shift a task down to another day, so perhaps I ran out of time on Tuesday and needed to move that task to Wednesday, it became very messy and difficult to track what I was doing week by week. So this book started falling to the wayside a little bit. And even in my Q1 techo kaigi, I was saying that I wasn't entirely sure that my work was busy enough to warrant me keeping a dedicated work planner. But what was working really well for me was every week writing down my work priorities. So one or two, maximum three things that I was going to focus on for each week. And then also write down a running list of my weekly wins. And they weren't necessarily related to productivity, like submitting a journal article or submitting a grant application. But weekly wins could be saying no to a request, setting boundaries, and taking time to rest. As an academic, I am no stranger to burnout, anxiety, and stress. And in fact, I previously worked for such a challenging organization with rampant bullying and harassment that I developed CPTSD. So my work planner is as much about tracking my work tasks as it is about reminding me to find balance. So after struggling a little bit to design a system that worked for me, I persevered and shared my struggles on this YouTube channel. And as always, received incredible advice and insight from other people who have either used the Hobonichi weeks or another system to track their work tasks to good effect. And I am really glad to say that in the last month, I finally developed a system for tracking my work tasks that work really well for me, at least in this season of my career. And that is using the Alistair method. I put down Monday, Tuesday through to Saturday, Sunday. I still have my work priorities at the top. And then I have a to-do list in which I break down my tasks. So here I would have teaching, and I teach my undergraduates on Monday and Wednesday every week. But then there might be subtasks related to teaching. In here, I needed to mark late submissions for assessment tasks. I submitted some student concerns. So my faculty requires me to produce a report at the start of every semester just about students who might be struggling, who might have shared with me that they're not able to attend class because of their high workload. I submit those concerns to the faculty. And what I love about my university is that they don't collect that information to police students. They collect that information so they can reach out to the students and link them up with resources and counselors who are able to help them. So I note down all of my tasks and I tick them off. If I thought I was going to do something on Tuesday and I needed to migrate it to Wednesday, I can do that easily there. If I thought that I needed to do something on both Wednesday and Thursday, I'll start off the week by putting down just dots in each of those 2 days. But then I would be so efficient, maybe check off the task on Wednesday, and I didn't need to do something on Thursday. I can keep this side of the page for all of my events, meetings, seminars. I haven't had to use this side, but I'm thinking I could start keeping deadlines, or I could just stretch it out because my events and my meetings certainly need a lot more space than this first third of the column. But this is working out so beautifully. And I haven't had the chance to write it yet, but I have been trying, at least it's my intention, to keep up with a ritual of writing down my weekly wins. In this book, I have exclusively been using my Sailor Pro Gear Slim in Dragon Palace, also in a medium fine nib, inked with Diamine Celadon Cat, which to me is a perfect match for this lovely pen. Last but certainly not least, one of my favorite planners this year has been my Hobonichi Weeks for Health and Wellness. This project was entirely inspired by Alison from Little Coco Studio, whose comprehensive, thorough guides to how she has kept a Hobonichi Weeks for health and wellness tracking, even if she might have different health struggles and conditions than mine, have been invaluable and instructive in me developing a system that has worked beautifully for me. So as I mentioned, my unique health issues are CPTSD, which manifests through anxiety, hypervigilance, dissociation, flashbacks, and that has flow-on effects with insomnia, especially sleep maintenance insomnia, which means I usually don't have trouble falling asleep at the start of a night, but I will tend to wake up in the middle of the night and toss and turn for many hours before I'm able to fall back asleep, and also with recurring migraines. So I started off the year with a system that has evolved over time as my needs, my capacity, and my processes for planning have changed. But generally, I split up the left-hand side into 3 columns. I would write events, meetings, commitments in the left-hand side, much like my work planner. But then in the middle column, I will generally write this a few days in advance, noting down what my care priority is for that week. So is it, for example, that I noticed I've been feeling really stiff, really sore? And so I'm going to look at the weather forecast, and if I see it's going to be clear skies, warm, not too hot, as it sometimes gets here on the Gold Coast, and I might write down that I'm going to commit myself to taking a daily walk for the remainder of the week. It could be noticing that I've been particularly stressed at work, and so needing to really intentionally take some me time on the Saturday or Sunday to properly pour back into my cups. Then I've been using the 3rd column to write about my feelings, because I find it's not very useful for me to note down my mood, for example, through a very simple 5-point scale from happy to sad, with neutral in between. But I really want to break that down. Maybe I was feeling very blue in the morning. I was despondent, I was short, I was snappy with my son and my partner. But then I did something at lunchtime. Maybe I suggested that we go out to one of our favorite cafes and buy a nice cup of coffee and do a walk around the local lake. And maybe that was able to shift my mood towards feeling more patient, more optimistic, kinder to myself and others for the rest of the day. And you can't really capture that in a simple scale with an icon about my mood, but I do have enough space in this column to elaborate on my emotions. I started the year tracking what I ate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, hoping that it would deter me from eating too much junk food, but I didn't find this very helpful. And because I was still practicing the daily habit of working in this health and wellness planner, If I came back after 3 or 4 days, I would find it so easily that I had completely forgotten what I ate for the prior days. So it became quite difficult to maintain this journal. So I changed things up a little bit. So I started then reviewing a video that Alison had made, and I noticed that her habits and her trackers were really clear ways for her to establish daily rituals that restored her health and wellness. I moved my sleep tracker here, and here I'll dot down how many hours of sleep I got, but I also draw a line if I've experienced insomnia. I confess this isn't the best system because, in retrospect, it's hard to remember how severe that insomnia was. There are times where my insomnia is so bad that, let's say, I fall asleep at 10, I wake up at 2 a.m., and I can't fall back asleep for the rest of the night. So, that to me is almost as severe as it gets. There are also times where I get up at 2 a.m., I notice my heart rate is elevated. Maybe it's because I woke up from a nightmare, or maybe it's simply that, having suffered from sleep maintenance insomnia for many months, my body and my mind are primed to feel anxious about my expected struggles falling back asleep. So, what I do is I might get out of bed so I don't learn to associate my bed with struggles and anxiety. And I go to the couch and I'll do something relaxing, like watching a relaxing stationery video or listening to a cozy audiobook for 30 minutes. And then when I notice my heart rate coming back down to normal, I notice myself feeling calmer and sleepier, I'll move back to bed and then I'll fall back asleep. Maybe from the time where I got up to when I fell back asleep, it could have been no more than an hour. So in this system, I only do one mark for any kind of insomnia, and it is a little bit difficult to track. But I did appreciate having a clearer daily tracking system at the top. Here I was noting what days of the week I took a walk outside, when I did a yoga routine, when I journaled, when I did some sort of mindfulness activity, whether it was a body scan exercise or whether I did a guided meditation, whether I socialized. And for me, as a busy mom, socializing doesn't look like a 2 hour lunch with a friend, like maybe it used to before kids. But for me, social could mean having a phone call with someone, or even I love to send voice messages to a lot of my friends. And there might be an hour throughout the day where we're sending messages back and forth to each other. So that's socializing for me. Whether I took my vitamins, whether I washed my face, and whether or not I got some cuddles from my loved ones. I track how many cups of caffeine I took, and I admit the system doesn't quite capture nuance. So I love my teas and coffees, but there's definitely a difference between having a strong cup of espresso in the morning versus having a cup of green tea in the afternoon. But nevertheless, as imperfect as this system is, I've been tracking my daily caffeine intake. I've been tracking my alcohol intake, although I have to admit most days I don't drink alcohol. I tend to drink alcohol only at special events or while I'm traveling. I've been tracking my mood, so I moved out of the graph that I had earlier in the year and I moved towards simply drawing an icon for each day of the week. I've noted my anxiety, which you can see that week was pretty bad for my anxiety. And the way I've been injecting a bit of nuance there is I'll do one stroke if it's what I would consider milder anxiety, but I'll do a second stroke, turning it into a cross if I think that anxiety is severe. And indeed, when I look back at my notes, I can see that that was the week where Cyclone Alfred struck our town. So I was very, very anxious about the approaching Category 2 cyclone. And I struggled with insomnia, but I didn't struggle with flashbacks or migraines that week. Now, let me fast forward to the past month. So I've been maintaining this practice of tracking events, meetings, my self-care priority, my feelings, my habits, trackers, and my sleep. Although in the last 2 weeks, I've fallen off the wagon a little bit. I didn't have a chance to come back in this book at all, but I still have records of my sleep, which is captured on my Apple Watch, which I can access through the app. And I was able to note these down. And you might be able to notice that I've actually been sleeping really well. And in fact, that's a reflection of the fact that I have been doing really well. I am welcoming the fact that I haven't felt the need to dip into this book because my mental health has probably been better than it has been for the last 3 years. I'm so grateful to have had this book because, as you can compare it with early March, there have been times where spending 5 minutes writing my self-care priority, writing about my feelings, tracking what I've been doing, how I've been sleeping, have been the one thing helping me keep my head above water. So when I say the last 2 weeks have been so good that I've forgotten about my health and wellness planner, that is a very, very welcome thing. Now, that said, I still appreciate tracking where I can and where I have records, for example, where I can dip into my memories of how many cups of coffee and tea I drank that day, how much I slept. I am putting it in this book because I want to see the patterns for why my mental health have been struggling, but also when my mental health has been really good. And some of the concurrent occurrences has been that as we approach winter here on the Gold Coast, the temperature have dropped to a point where it is really lovely outside most days, and we're not having pouring thunderstorms. And because of that, I've been able to take a walk outside, sometimes 2 walks, every single day. I haven't needed to do yoga because I generally do yoga if I notice that I haven't been able to take a walk and I'm feeling stiff, I'm feeling sore, and I can do a yoga routine from the comfort of my own home, irrespective of the weather outside. I've been having very minimal symptoms around my CPTSD, if any at all. And I've also been learning to distinguish between stress and anxiety. So, stress can, for me, physiologically look very similar, feel very similar to anxiety, right? Elevated heart rate, sweaty palms, my stomach feels like it's in knots, and I'll have a suppressed appetite. But when I'm anxious, I have spiraling thoughts of fear and panic that I don't have when I'm stressed. So my inner monologue when I'm stressed sounds more like, oh my God, I can't believe I have that deadline tomorrow. Oh, why do I have so many emails? But when I'm anxious, it's like, oh my God, everything's going to go wrong. I'm going to die. Everything's going to fall apart. It's a very different kind of monologue. So I have to recognize that sometimes when I think that I've got anxiety or mild anxiety, it's really just stress. Because then the moment I check off that task or, it pops into my head, oh, I forgot to send a message to that person, and I send them that message, then that stress goes away. Whereas anxiety, it's almost resistant to rationality, right? The fear and the panic will just spiral and spiral and spiral. And it can be quite difficult, especially when it's severe, for any kind of evidence even to walk me down from the edge. And it is so satisfying for me every week to write out these symptoms that I used to struggle with on a daily basis and know that I haven't had to check off flashbacks or hypervigilance in many months. To be able to see my progress through this health and wellness planner has been such a vital and empowering task. And that's not to say that my circumstances will change, that I could be met with experiences and tragedies in my life for the second half of the year, that then I wouldn't need this book again. But I love this book so much, and it has become a companion and a partner in my healing. I have been using my Pilot Custom 823 exclusively in this Hobonichi weeks, and I have this inked up almost permanently now with Gieban Ombre de Birmanie. This nib is so wet despite being so fine, and it really makes all my shading inks sing. So getting to write with this pen, with this ink in this book, has been an absolute joy. That said, this year I've really struggled with the paper quality issues of the Sanzen Tomo River paper in my Hobonichi weeks. At first, I did think that my Hobonichi A6 techo had luckily been spared from all of the paper issues. But I have to admit, being very, very critical and scrutinizing the performance, I have noticed a little bit of inconsistency where some pages my writing spreads a little bit and comes out looking closer to a medium, and then some days where the writing is closer to a fine. But this being a medium fine nib, the variation isn't so drastic that it's distracting. Whereas it is very, very drastic and evident in my Hobonichi weeks. So something about these papers have been particularly tough. And I have had quite significant ghosting, if not bleed through, in some of these pages that I have never experienced using Hobonichi planners and their paper before. So starting every spread, not knowing what it's going to look like, how the ink's going to pour and spread and bloom, how difficult the writing will be to look back on, which is a struggle when you're like, I have a meeting with who today? It's such a pain. So because of that, I don't think I will be investing in a Hobonichi weeks. Hobonichi has promised that they will address their paper issues next year, but my experience working in these books, as valuable as some of the systems have been to me for their specific functions, I've started associating frustration with this paper and with this planner. So I think I will dip my toes more cautiously back into Hobonichi and not purchase quite as many books as I did for 2025 in order to just be sure that their paper quality control issues have well and truly been resolved. My other frustration with keeping multiple compartmentalized notebooks is that I don't have one book where all of my events are gathered on the one page. So I've been keeping work meetings, work milestones, deadlines, events exclusively in the Unsoro Bijitsukai weeks, and then all my personal events, including health appointments, as well as social events, are all in the health and wellness tracker. So each of my days could look like, oh, great, I only have my seminar at 4 p.m. and I have a research seminar at noon. That's excellent. But then I might go into this journal and go, oh, wait, but then I have dinner plans with that friend. Oh, and don't forget, I have to go rush over to the doctor's appointment. So it's actually been really hard to see at a glance what commitments I have on each day and how much free time I have on those days, which obviously has flow-on effects in terms of how many work tasks I may realistically get done that day, given personal and professional commitments, and also be able to track how I'm feeling. So let's say I have a very stressful week. Well, that might very well have to do with an intensive teaching load, but it's not necessarily being documented in this book at the detail that it's being documented in this book. So there is a lot of wisdom in putting all of my commitments, events, activities into the one place. But of course, that brings me back to what this cousin was for. It was a space where I got to put all of my events in the one page, but it was difficult for me because I soon realized that I was documenting beautiful family memories with events, occurrences, treasured memories that I wanted to hold on forever, alongside pages and pages where I was venting about a moral dilemma that I was experiencing with a colleague. And in the end, I realized that I don't want to keep my venting. For me, it's the emotional muck and the garbage that I want to be able to pour out onto a long form page. And then I want to respectfully and lovingly recycle and compost at the end of the year. I do miss my cousin very, very much since finishing this book at the end of March. I'm thinking in 2026, I would like to move back into a cousin, but from everything that I've learned about myself, I know that I will miss having a toddler book. So I will purchase another A6 techo alongside it so that I can continue writing these tender letters to my son every day in a little book like this in 2026. Every single month, my son is getting easier, more independent, more skilled. He's growing physically larger so that he's able to carry his step ladder to the bathroom sink, to climb on tippy toes to reach the faucet, wash his hands, lather with soap, rinse his hands, climb off, dry off, all those things that needed me to do for him every step of the way just a few months ago. Now, in fact, if I pull up his sleeves, he gets annoyed with me and he says, Augie do. And he'll pull his sleeves back down first, only to then pull them back up and show me that he can do it himself. He's such a marvel and a wonder. So, with all of this capacity growing week by week, I am optimistic about being able to move back into a more elaborate daily planner system. As a stationery lover, and I'm sure many of you would be able to relate, I have no shortage of lovely notebooks that are still in their original packaging. I have a Midori and a Hobonichi sitting right here on my writing desk that I will set aside in case I find I need a space for venting and emotional release. That way, I can keep a book compartmentalized with all of the messy processing that I need to get done. And when it's full, I can even design a ritual around letting it go and recycling it with intention and thanking it for how it's helped me process through difficult times. But then my Hobonichi daily planners, journals can go forward being this playful space where I get to pour out the most joyful, loving parts of who I am and the life that I have been so lucky that I get to lead. Of course, we're still only halfway through the year, and my system could shift a lot because every week I learn something new from each and every one of you who share your approaches, your practices, your systems in the comment section of my videos. I get brilliant ideas about what to do with the notebooks that I have previously been hoarding or too precious to crack open with what I would dismiss as a poor idea. But all of you have given me so much encouragement, so much inspiration in order to spend more time cherishing what I own with intention and with joy. Thank you so much for being here today. I would love to hear in the comments below what have been your experiences with your planners and journals over this past 6 months. Have you done any planner hopping? Do you intend to add any books to your collections? Or lovingly say goodbye to any books that are no longer serving you in the season of your life? I would love to hear everything that you have learned through your journals and your planners if you care to share them. But for now, I wish you a wonderful week ahead, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.